The horizon of Tryon 4 was a bruised line of crimson and gold, the dying sun casting a bloody glow over the barren landscape. Lieutenant Marcus Mace Hawkins stood at the edge of a jagged ridge, his steely eyes fixed on the dark shapes descending from the sky. The Varlock fleet, a swarm of blackened leviathans, blotted out the stars, their shadows stretching across the colony like the hand of death. Mace's jaw clenched as he surveyed the scene. The colony below was a collection of hastily erected shelters and dusty streets, a fragile refuge on this desolate world. But to the people who lived here, farmers, miners, families, it was home. And Mace would be damned if he let it fall to the Varlock. His calm link crackled to life, and the voice of Commander Crixa, cold and dripping with disdain, filled the air. "Human," she began, her voice echoing with a haughty tone, "I suggest you surrender now. Your colony is nothing more than a speck of dust in the wind, easily swept away by the might of the Varlock Empire. Do not waste your lives in a futile attempt at resistance." Mace's lip curled into a grim smile. He pressed a button on his wrist gauntlet, opening a channel. "Crixa, is it?" he replied, his voice steady and calm. "Let me tell you something about dust. It may seem insignificant, but in the right hands, it can blind and choke even the mightiest of warriors. We're not surrendering. We're not running. We're standing our ground." A pause hung in the air, heavy with tension. Crix's laughter, sharp and derisive, echoed through the calm link. "How quaint. Very well, human. Prepare to be swept aside." The link went dead, leaving Mace alone with his thoughts. His mind flashed back to another world, another time, where he had been powerless to save his family from an alien onslaught. That failure had haunted him for years, but it had also forged him into the man he was now, a man determined to never let that happen again. He turned away from the ridge, his gaze sweeping over the small group of soldiers gathered behind him. They were a mix of grizzled veterans and wide-eyed rookies, all looking to him for guidance. He saw the fear in their eyes, but he also saw the spark of determination, the will to fight. "Listen up." Mace barked, his voice cutting through the evening air. "We've got one chance to make it out of this alive. The Varlock think they've got us beat, but they don't know what we're capable of. We're going to hit them where it hurts, use the tunnels to our advantage, and show them that humanity isn't as weak as they think." He saw the nods of agreement, the shift in posture as his words took hold. These were good soldiers, and they trusted him. That trust was a weapon, one he intended to wield with precision. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains, Mace felt the weight of the coming battle settle on his shoulders. The Varlock would soon learn that the humans of Tryon 4 were not so easily swept aside. The shadows deepened, and with them, the resolve in Mace's heart. The war had begun. The silence before the storm was a cruel one, hanging in the air like the final breath before a scream. Lieutenant Marcus Mace Hawkins crouched low in the underbrush, the cold metal of his rifle pressed against his cheek. Around him, his team waited, their breaths shallow and their nerves taut. Above, the sky was a canvas of shifting shadows as the Varlock assault ships descended, their engines humming with deadly purpose. Mace's voice crackled softly through the team's comms. "Remember the plan. Stick to the shadows, hit them hard, and disappear. We don't need to win this fight in one blow. We just need to make them bleed." The sound of alien boots hitting the ground echoed through the valley. The Varlock soldiers, towering figures clad in gleaming armor, spread out in a calculated formation. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical, as if they believed themselves untouchable. Mace's lip curled in grim satisfaction. "Let them think that," he thought. "It'll make the fall all the sweeter." He raised his hand, signaling his team to move. In an instant, the stillness shattered. His soldiers darted from their hiding spots, striking with brutal efficiency. The first Varlock soldier went down before he even had time to process the ambush, a clean shot through the visor. The second fell to a blade, the flash of steel quick and deadly in the dim light. The Varlock reacted, but too slowly. Mace's team was already gone, melting back into the terrain, leaving only confusion and corpses in their wake. The comms erupted with the frantic chatter of Varlock commanders, barking orders, trying to regain control. But the humans had already struck again, and again, each attack as swift and unexpected as the last. Mace moved like a ghost among them, his rifle barking death in sharp bursts. He saw the confusion in the Varlock's movements. The hesitation creeping into their disciplined ranks. These weren't the invincible warriors they had been led to believe they were. They were just soldiers, soldiers who could bleed, who could die. He rounded a corner, catching sight of a Varlock commander shouting orders. Mace didn't hesitate. A single shot rang out, and the commander crumpled, his words silenced forever. Mace ducked back into the shadows, the weight of his rifle a comforting presence in his hands. "Regroup at the ridge," he ordered through the comms. "Phase 1 is done. Let's get ready for the next wave." His team converged on the designated point, their faces flushed with adrenaline. Mace could see it in their eyes, the realization that they had not only survived the first encounter but had struck a blow against their enemy. There was fear still, but now it was tempered with resolve. "Good work," Mace said, his voice low but filled with pride. "But this is just the beginning. Crix is going to throw everything she's got at us now. We need to stay sharp, stay smart. We've got them on the back foot. Let's keep them there." The sound of the Varlock's angered roars echoed through the valley. A chorus of rage and frustration. Mace felt a grim satisfaction settle in his chest. The Varlock had come here expecting an easy victory, a quick sweep of a weak and scattered foe. But now, they knew the truth, the humans of Tryon 4 were far from broken. They were just getting started. The tunnels beneath Tryon 4 were a labyrinth of darkness and echoes, carved deep into the planet's rocky heart by generations of miners. Now, they served a new purpose, a deadly maze for the unsuspecting Varlock invaders. Lieutenant Marcus "Mace" Hawkins led his team through the narrow passages, their footsteps silent on the dusty ground. The air was thick with tension, each breath laced with anticipation. Above, the battle raged on, but down here, it was a different kind of war. A war of patience, of cunning, of knowing when to strike and when to wait. Mace's plan was simple: draw the Varlock forces into the tunnels, separate them, and pick them off one by one. The alien superior technology was useless in these cramped, twisting corridors. Down here, it was all about instincts, and Mace knew how to use that to his advantage. The comms crackled in his ear. "They're in position," whispered Sergeant Cole, one of his most trusted soldiers. "Just like you predicted." Mace checked his watch. Any second now. The ground vibrated with the approach of the Varlock soldiers, their heavy boots thudding against the stone. The dim light from their helmets cast long shadows on the walls, making them seem even more menacing. But Mace felt no fear, only a cold, calculated determination. He raised his hand, signaling his team to ready their weapons. They moved like shadows, silent and unseen, taking their positions along the narrow passage. The tension was palpable, every second stretching into an eternity. Finally, the first Varlock soldier stepped into the choke point, oblivious to the danger. Mace waited, counting heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Now. Mace's voice was a sharp whisper. And his team opened fire as one. The tunnel erupted in a blaze of gunfire and explosions. The Varlock soldiers, caught in the crossfire, had no room to maneuver, no cover to shield them from the onslaught. Their superior armor cracked and shattered under the concentrated fire, their howls of pain and surprise echoing through the tunnel. Mace picked his targets with precision, each shot finding its mark. The Varlock fell in droves, their advance grinding to a halt as they scrambled to retreat. But there was nowhere to go. The tunnel behind them had already been collapsed by Mace's earlier explosives, trapping them in the killing field. "Press the attack," Mace ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. His team advanced, pushing the Varlock back, step by bloody step. The aliens' confidence, so unshakable at the start, was now crumbling. They were not invincible. They were not unstoppable. Here, in these dark, twisting tunnels, they were nothing more than prey. Mace watched as the last of the Varlock forces were cut down, their blood staining the rocky floor. The echoes of battle faded, replaced by the heavy breathing of his soldiers. They had won, but there was no time for celebration. Fall back to the command center, Mace ordered, already moving. We've dealt them a heavy blow, but Crixa's still up there. And she'll be out for blood. As his team melted back into the shadows, Mace couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. The trap had worked. The Varlock had been lured into the darkness, and they had paid the price. But the war was far from over. Crixa would be furious. And that made her dangerous. But Mace was ready. The battle for Tryon 4 was only just beginning. The aftermath of the ambush was a graveyard of Varlock bodies, their once imposing forms now lifeless heaps of metal and flesh. The tunnels, which had echoed with the sounds of battle, were now eerily silent, save for the faint hum of Mace's calm link. He adjusted his grip on his rifle. The weight of the coming confrontation settling into his bones. Above ground, the Varlock forces were in chaos. The ambush had crippled their assault, but Crixa still commanded a formidable contingent. Mace knew she wouldn't retreat, not after this. Her pride and the might of the Varlock Empire wouldn't allow it. She'd come for him, personally, and that was exactly what he wanted. As his team regrouped at the colony's central command post, Mace scanned the horizon. The skies were thick with the smoke of burning ships, the scent of war heavy in the air. The Varlock were regrouping, forming a defensive perimeter around their leader. Crixa's flagship loomed above the battlefield, a dark omen against the blood-red sky. "Mace, we've got movement," Sergeant Cole reported, his voice steady despite the tension. "She's coming down, just like you said." "Good," Mace replied, his tone cold as steel. "This ends now." He led his team through the colony's wrecked streets, the once peaceful settlement now a battleground littered with debris and the scars of war. As they approached the central square, Mace spotted Crixa's dropship descending, its sleek, black form landing with a predatory grace. The ramp lowered with a hiss, and there she was, Commander Crixa, resplendent in her dark armor, her eyes burning with fury. She stepped forward, her gaze locking onto Mace with a hatred that transcended the battlefield. Behind her, the remaining Varlock soldiers formed up, their weapons aimed and ready. Mace's team took their positions, fanning out to cover all angles. But Mace himself stepped forward, rifle in hand, facing Crixa with unflinching resolve. The two commanders stood across from each other, the distance between them charged with years of enmity, cultures clashing in this final moment. "You've caused quite the mess, human," Crixa sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "But it ends here. You and your pitiful colony will be nothing more than a memory." Mace's gaze was icy, his voice steady. "You underestimated us, Crixa. You thought we were weak, easy prey. But humans don't break. We fight. And we survive." Crixa's eyes narrowed, and with a growl of rage, she raised her weapon. But Mace was faster. In a single, fluid motion, he aimed and fired, the shot ringing out like a thunderclap. The plasma bolt struck Crixa's weapon, shattering it in her hands. Before Crixa could react, Mace charged. He was on her in an instant, their bodies colliding with a force that knocked them both to the ground. They grappled in the dirt, Crixa's strength meeting Mace's relentless determination. She slashed at him with a hidden blade, the edge catching his armor and slicing through the fabric beneath. Pain flared through his side, but Mace ignored it, his focus razor-sharp. He drove his elbow into her helmet, the impact jarring her just long enough for him to pin her beneath him. "You thought you could conquer us," Mace hissed, his breath hot against her visor. "But this is our world. And we'll never bow to the likes of you." With a final, decisive move, Mace wrenched the blade from her grasp and plunged it into the soft spot beneath her armor. Crixa gasped, her body stiffening as the life drained from her eyes. The proud commander of the Varlock Empire was no more. Mace stood, bloodied and battered, but victorious. Around him, the remaining Varlock soldiers hesitated, their leader's death sending ripples of uncertainty through their ranks. Sensing the shift, Mace's team pressed the advantage, driving the invaders back with renewed ferocity. The battle ended as abruptly as it began. The Varlock, leaderless and demoralized, retreated, their once unshakable resolve shattered. As the last of their ships lifted off, leaving Tryon 4 behind, Mace allowed himself a moment of relief. The colony had been saved, at least for now, but as he looked out over the ruined landscape, Mace knew this was only the beginning. The Varlock would be back, stronger and angrier than before. Yet, in this moment of victory, he also knew that humanity would be ready. They had proven themselves today, not just to the Varlock, but to the universe. Mace wiped the blood from his brow, his gaze steely as he surveyed the aftermath. Tryon 4 still stood, and so did he. And as long as there was breath in his body, he would fight to ensure it stayed that way. The war wasn't over. But this battle belonged to the humans.